In the year 1999, the world was bustling with excitement about the upcoming millennium. The introduction of the euro had just taken place while the dot-com bubble was about to reach its zenith. However, in Japan, a silent revolution was taking form, a revolution that would have unforeseen impacts on the global finance industry. A group of ordinary Japanese housewives started to explore the world of currency trading from the comfort of their homes. They began trading millions of dollars and became known as Mrs. Watanabe. Their aim was to protect their families, and they had only personal computers and an unwavering determination. They shook the global financial markets from their kitchen tables, changing it forever. During the late 1980s, Japan's economy was booming, and the real estate and stock markets were thriving. However, things took a drastic turn when the 1990s arrived. Japan's economic bubble burst, causing a widespread crash. Many people lost their jobs, companies went bankrupt, and trillions of dollars in wealth vanished. The country was in dire straits, and the government needed to figure out a way to fix things. To address the issue, Japan's central bank decided to reduce interest rates to zero. This made it easier for people to borrow money, but it didn't necessarily result in more significant profits for regular individuals. However, one person, Mrs. Watanabe, saw an opportunity. She realized that she could take out cheap yen loans and exchange them for other currencies that offered higher interest rates. By doing so, she could earn extra interest money for free. This technique is called the carry trade, and Mrs. Watanabe used it to her advantage. While the big shots on Wall Street were struggling, she was making a profit from her kitchen table. Her clever strategy had a significant impact on the world of finance. In the 1990s, housewives in Japan started to make a lot of money through forex trading while their husbands were busy with their daily office jobs. These women, known as Mrs. Watanabe, were very successful and were able to afford luxury trips, multiple homes, and fancy cars. Some of them even made millions off their trades, buying designer clothes, and living like queens. The success of Mrs. Watanabe inspired more Japanese women to pursue financial freedom through forex. The housewives formed close-knit trading groups, sharing trading tips and encouraging each other to make more daring trades. However, their success was threatened when the carry trade they had been winning big on had a dark side. If the yen suddenly shot up in value, paying back those cheap loans would get way more expensive, putting their profits at risk. In 1998, the Russian crisis caused markets worldwide to panic, spooking investors and causing them to dump their risky bets and rush to buy safe assets like the yen and dollar. With all these people buying yen, its value skyrocketed, which was bad news for our housewife carry traders. The cheap loans they took out in yen were now much pricier, and their profitable game had turned into a ticking time bomb. As the yen surged, their trades unraveled fast, wiping out winnings within days. This was a harsh wake-up call for Mrs. Watanabe and her fellow carry traders. The Russian crisis showed them that even the cleverest money tricks come with risks. Mrs. Watanabe's days of easy profits were over, but this setback only made her more determined to master the complex world of forex trading. The appreciation of the yen was a shock for Mrs. Watanabe and the other carry traders. Almost overnight, the profits they had accumulated over the years vanished into thin air. Many traders were left with losses in the thousands or even millions of dollars as their trades rapidly unraveled for the first time ever. Mrs. Watanabe found herself in a difficult situation, and her previously cozy home office now felt like a war room as she watched helplessly. At the same time, the surging yen ate away her account balances. Even the experienced traders cut their losses as quickly as possible, but the inexperienced ones, who didn't fully comprehend the risks, saw their accounts wiped out entirely. Mrs. Watanabe was no longer relaxed and carefree. Her trades no longer generated passive profits, and she was now glued to her screens, anxiously watching exchange rates tick up by the minute, calculating just how much this crisis had set her back. The mounting losses felt personal, shaking Mrs. Watanabe's confidence, but she was not one to back down in the face of adversity. She took a deep breath, analyzed her mistakes, and vowed to approach trading more cautiously. The Russian crisis has shown that even veterans get blindsided sometimes. Mrs. Watanabe was down but not out. This was just the first of many storms she would have to weather. However, Japan couldn't catch a break even after the shakeup from Russia. The economy entered a new danger zone, with deflation causing prices and wages to drop continuously, which put the squeeze on regular folks. People had less spending money in their pockets to stop the deflation, and with wages shrinking too, the situation worsened. In 2001, Japan's central bank introduced a new weapon, quantitative easing, which meant flooding the economy with cash to drive down interest rates even more. The goal was to get people and businesses borrowing and spending again. For Mrs. Watanabe, QE was a game changer. With interest rates at record lows, the profit potential on carry trades looked juicy once again. She could lock in even bigger gains by borrowing cheap yen to invest where rates were higher. However, the ghost of Russia still haunted her. This time, Mrs. Watanabe knew she must balance greed with caution. The markets giveth, but they also taketh away. She'd need to play her cards more carefully from now on. By the mid-2000s, Mrs. Watanabe wasn't just a local legend, she was going global. Housewives kept raking in big returns from carry trades, and the rest of the world finally took notice. Stories spread of ordinary Tokyo homemakers making a killing in forex between school runs and grocery trips. The mystery captivated mainstream media. Mrs. Watanabe became shorthand for Japan's army of housewife traders. They were now moving over $6 billion daily, a huge slice of all forex deals. When Mrs. Watanabe spoke, many listened, including big banks and hedge funds who piled into carry trades too. However, experts also warned of the sky-high risks involved if and when this housewife trading bonanza unraveled. The ripples could rock markets globally. Mrs. Watanabe was no longer just a hometown helper in the finance game. She was now a VIP player whose every move affected players around the world. But greater rewards also meant greater risks, as she would soon learn.
2008 was a tumultuous year for the economy.
The year 2008 was marked by dark days that even the most composed found unsettling. The bursting of the U.S. housing bubble and the collapse of Wall Street banks sent panic across the globe, leading to a full-blown global crisis. This financial disaster was 10 times more devastating than anything we had ever seen before. As markets fell off a cliff, investors frantically scrambled out of risky trades and into safe havens, including the Japanese yen. This led to a sharp surge in the value of the yen, causing Mrs. Watanabe's borrowed funds to balloon to unpayable levels. The yen's appreciation meant that her profits from these trades evaporated, resulting in catastrophic losses for hundreds of thousands of Japanese people, with some losing their entire life savings. It was a massacre that left Mrs. Watanabe shell-shocked and changed forever. The great financial crisis had robbed her of her innocence and exposed carry trades and other easy money tactics as childish folly. It was time for her to grow up fast and get wise to trading the hard way. After being slammed by the 2008 disaster, Mrs. Watanabe had to choose between retreating or reinventing herself. Never one to wave the white flag, she chose the latter and decided to shake off her old-school carry trade ways. The game of trading changed when it evolved into day trading, which was faster and more intense than the slow and steady carry trades. Day trading involved buying and selling within a single day instead of leaving positions open for months. This required a whole new set of skills and strategies, which Mrs. Watanabe learned through online trading courses and improved technology that allowed her to trade easily from home. As a result, Japan saw a surge of housewives day trading aggressively between chores, with some even forming clubs to share tips and support. However, day trading also posed new pressures and risks, and Mrs. Watanabe had to adapt by reinventing herself as a quick change artist. She realized that old strategies wouldn't work in the post-crisis world and needed to keep evolving with the times. Even in 2013, when Japan was still struggling with economic woes and a ballooning national debt, Mrs. Watanabe remained relevant by learning the lessons of yesterday. When Prime Minister Shinzo Abe launched a bold new plan called Abenomics to kickstart growth through ultra-easy money, Mrs. Watanabe watched carefully. The Bank of Japan fired up its printing presses again for more quantitative easing to defeat deflation and reignite spending. However, lower rates could also reboot carry trades, triggering mixed feelings for Mrs. Watanabe. She remembered the hard lessons about free lunches and knew that her next move could make or break Abenomics. Mrs. Watanabe's story symbolizes the power of taking calculated risks. As a humble housewife, she seized control of her financial destiny and found herself moving markets. Her pioneering trading journey has spanned decades, crashes, evolutions, and revolutions. She has adapted to stay on top of losses that would have sunk less gritty players, making her more resilient. Her drive and courage are an inspiration far beyond finance, and her actions have changed economies. Mrs. Watanabe may seem like just a simple homemaker, but she has made space for everyday folks in the financial playgrounds of the elite. In 2023, Mrs. Watanabe and other retail traders were thrilled by a new wave of change in Japan's securities industry. The country's two biggest online brokerages, SBI Securities and Rakuten Securities, announced that they would be eliminating trading commissions for Japanese equities from September and October, respectively. This was the first time that such a move had been made by the country's securities industry, and it was a game changer for the millions of retail investors who had previously been paying fees for every trade they made. Mrs. Watanabe, like many others, was amazed by the news. She had been paying commissions ranging from 100 to 300 yen per trade, depending on the size and type of her orders. Over the years, these fees significantly reduced her profits and limited her trading frequency and flexibility. Now, she could trade as much as she wanted without worrying about the costs. She felt like a kid in a candy store. However, Mrs. Watanabe also realized that zero commission was not a magic bullet that guaranteed success. She still had to deal with risks such as volatility, liquidity, margin calls, and taxes. She also had to be careful not to overtrade or chase fads without doing proper research. She knew that trading was not a game of luck, but a game of skill and discipline. Mrs. Watanabe's story symbolizes the power of taking calculated risks and embracing change. As a humble housewife, she seized control of her financial destiny and found herself moving markets. Her pioneering trading journey has spanned decades, crashes, evolutions, and revolutions. Time and again, Mrs. Watanabe has adapted to stay on top of losses that would have sunk less gritty players, only making her stronger and smarter. She has never stopped learning and growing as a trader and as a person. Mrs. Watanabe is not just a legendary figure or a nickname. She is a role model and an inspiration for millions of retail traders around the world who aspire to achieve financial freedom and independence through stocks and forex trading. She is living proof that anyone can succeed in trading with passion, perseverance, and prudence. That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more stories like this. Also, leave a comment below and let me know what you think of Mrs. Watanabe and her trading journey. Thank you for watching. Madane.